Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you'll be talking a little bit about OSINT and digging into that, right?
Yeah, I hope we'll be digging into it. Hopefully, we get a lot of good questions, and hopefully, I don't bore anyone.
I think you'll be good. And as always, like I said, just go ahead and drop your questions. We'll keep track of the chat, and I'll leave it to you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining tonight. I know we're all busy, and if you're in the South and dealing with all the snow and everything, hopefully our power stays connected and all that fun stuff. So, thanks for everyone joining tonight. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully, we get a lot out of this talk. OSINT is something I'm very passionate about. I love talking about OSINT as much as I can, intelligence type things as well. I love open discussions. So if you guys have any questions while we're going through this, please drop those questions in there. If I don't see it, the team will and get those to me so I can answer them as soon when I can, or we'll answer them at the end. But I love the open discussion aspect. I'll stop every now and then and say, hey, any questions? Throw them in there if you can. If not, hold them to the end. But I do appreciate everyone's time. Let's get started with this. All right. So the title of this conversation or this presentation, I keep playing around with this title a little bit, putting intelligence into OSINT. OSINT is gaining popularity a lot with a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, and stuff that's out there, and everything we got going on in the world today. Open source intelligence. If you're not sure what OSINT is, it's just short for open source intelligence, and we'll talk more about what open source intelligence is and how we put the intelligence into the whole package of OSINT. All right, cool. So let's just start basic stuff. Who I am. So I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a student of knowledge of life, whatever you want to call it. I just love studying things and finding out new things, information, and just gather all the information, obviously, with OSINT, as you can see. I'm a mentor as well. In my spare time, when I do have it, I do some storm spotting for the North Texas area where I'm at. Like to chase those tornadoes when they come through our area when I can. Volunteer first responder as well. So when I get a call, I need to go help some people. I'll do that as well. As mentioned, though, I'm an OSINT guy. I'm an OSINT junkie, as I like to call myself, and I'm also a button pusher. I love just pushing buttons and finding out things. I think even today with the presentation we had going on today, I was pushing some buttons and got some things started for the team. And I'm like, I don't know what I did. I pushed buttons. That's all I did. But I'm also a former certified ethical hacker. I say former because I've let that go. I've let that lapse. I'm still ethical. Don't get me wrong. I just don't do as much hacking as I used to do. Any hacking I do is I find information that people typically either don't want me to find or they're trying to be sneaky, and I end up finding ways to find them in different in different methods and things of that nature. I'm also trained and certified as an open source intelligence professional with Intel Techniques. If you don't know who Intel Techniques is, Michael Bazell is, in my opinion, like the godfather of OSINT. I don't think he would call himself that. But, anyways, OSINT Intel Techniques is a great platform for getting some awesome, superb training. This is no push, and I'm not advertising for them by any means, but love their training. Certification was amazing as well, and I'd love to talk to you guys more about that if you want to hear about it. But I'm not going to bore you with certification talks and things of that nature. I'm also a co-host, co/slash founder of DC940. If you don't know what that is, it's a DEF CON group in Denton, Texas. We've been around, I think, as a DEF CON group maybe 3 or 4 years now. Prior to that, we were called Pwn School, longest running cybersecurity meetup in the city of Denton as well. And we also partner with other organizations like UNT and the cybersecurity program there to, make connections and whatnot. But we meet monthly as well. If you're in Denton or in the area, come visit us. If you're not, sorry, we don't put anything online, but we do have a Discord and we do have a website, and we can share those later as well if you guys want to, hop in those. And we like new people, so come visit us. We're cool people. So what is OSINT? So I have my own definition of OSINT, which I like to throw out there, which typically is I make CISOs not sleep at night. Essentially, I keep them awake. I keep them, worrying about things. But OSINT in itself is it's intelligence that's produced from public available information. I like to call it, and some others call it OSINT, which is open source information. So you're collecting an open source information and you're putting some intelligence behind it. You're putting some mindfulness behind it, some analytics behind it, a goal, a requirement. And we'll talk about more about that, what it is in a moment here. But essentially is taking that open source information and turning it into something that is intelligence, something that can be used to answer a question or a goal or intelligence requirement as we go. And as someone just said, OSINT, I will find you. Exactly. Internet doesn't forget as much as we like to. Friends and families post things all the time about us when we don't realize it. And a lot of times I find people because a family member posted something about them, typically. So really, really crazy. So let's talk about the intelligence life cycle. So once we talk about when we kind of understand what OSINT is, OSINT again is that public information. But there's a life cycle to this, like there's a life cycle to a whole lot of things in cybersecurity in general, right? So this life cycle is kind of here to guide us along our way and talk about one, what are the requirements, right? We got a plan, we need some direction. And that direction typically comes from our executives, right? What's important to them, what's important to the business, what's important to whatever department you're talking. It could be finance, it could be fraud, it could be your third party risk team, right? So what's important to them, and that is where we're going to get our direction. That's where we're going to get our intelligence requirements from, right? So you're going to plan and you're going to have the discussion with all those stakeholders, and then after that we're going to start talking about collection. We got to go out and we got to collect that data. We got to know where our resources are at. We need to find things, right? So that's kind of where we're at there. That collection method is we should already know, have an understanding of how we collect. We should know what sources we have, whether it's an internal resource, is it an external resource, right? Social media pages, external databases, internal databases. Maybe it's internal data collection you have from your host, your systems in your organization. Maybe it's part of your SIM, your log aggregator. That is where we need to understand where are we getting our data from, right? And then we've got to collect it. And then once we have all this data collected, right, as we're searching for it, whether it's on the social media websites, on the internet, anywhere, wherever it is, internal, external, then we have to start analysis the analysis part of this. We got to translate that data and then make it meaningful, right? Tell the story. I always tell people the biggest thing about cybersecurity is always have the ability to tell a story, right? As you're going through anything, whether it's incident response, whether it's intelligence, whether it's open source intelligence, all the intelligence, right? The SOCMENT, the GeoInts, all that. Tell a story, right? That's what you have to do and keep people engaged. And part of that story should encourage people to ask questions. And if you're asking questions and they're asking questions of you, then you're actually doing your job correctly, right? Because they're going to come back with more information. They're going to come back with more questions on, well, what about this? What about that? Cool. Let's go look at that next, right? This life cycle should never end. It should be a continuous life cycle based on your requirements. Now, if it's an ad hoc request or something, that obviously is going to have an end. It's going to have a goal, report at the end. Those are great. But once we get that analysis aspect done, we gave it some meat, we gave it some meaning, some direction, we're going to put this into production. And what that really means is presentation. How are you presenting it to your stakeholders, right? Is it going to be a PowerPoint? Is it going to be a Word doc? Is it going to be an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of data in it, right? Is it going to be mind mapped, right? How are we presenting this to our stakeholders so that they can actually digest it? And it could be all of those. It could be one, it could be all of those things that I just mentioned. But after we've given that presentation or we've given that report out, this is where we need feedback. We need to know, hey, was this good? Was this bad? And if you're just now starting into OSINT, you're starting into report writing and all this stuff, keep in mind you're going to fail. And that's fine because the goal with cybersecurity and the goal with anything in this realm that we live in today with intelligence or security or cybersecurity is to fail forward, right? And you want to do it fast because the faster you fail, the faster you can learn from those failures and get better and get better and get better. So it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. That's fine. That's where that feedback loop comes into because you need that feedback from your stakeholders saying, hey, that was great, but we need this. And we were looking for this and said, cool, maybe you have that data and you just failed to put in a report because you didn't know if that was really what they wanted. Cool. Go back, grab the data, redo it, right? Put it back in the report, represent it to them, goal achieved. But at the end of the day, this should present them that be asking questions, right? Either to get better or to what's the next steps? How do we react to this? What are your recommendations? How do we protect ourselves from whatever you just researched and did? And we'll dig into more and more of this as we dig into this life cycle here. Let's see, my slides will go forward one more. Cool. So the intelligence life cycle, I just talked through most of this. I have it documented here. So if we go back and rewatch the presentation, you have this as well. So that planning and direction phase, it's purpose, it's scope, right? Then you're going to identify your goals and your tasks. Those are the intelligence requirements or the essential elements of information. What's essential to those stakeholders? What are they wanting to go? What kind of information are they trying to learn? This could be a mergers and acquisition type thing, right? Where they need all the information about a company. This could be a third party risk assessment where they're like, hey, we need to know if doing business with this vendor is bad for business, right? But a lot of times, those intelligence requirements are going to come from those stakeholders, those department heads, whether that's procurement. In most cases, it's typically the CISOs, so your cybersecurity information security officers. Could be a CSO, a CSO, CISO, director of intelligence. Could be IT, right? Whoever your partner is, could be the CFO, could be the CEO, depending on how far up the ladder you are. But those are your stakeholders. Keep those people in mind and what information they need and how you're going to present to them, because presenting to a C-level suite is different than your blue teamers or your red teamers or your IT peers. It's going to be different. So you got to be able to talk the lingo too. So learn that lingo and how to talk to executives as best as you can. Presentation is key here on this. That collecting and processing phase, I always say it's how do you answer the 5 Ws? Who or what are you after? What are you looking for? When do you need it? Where are we going with this, right? Why are we doing this? What's the goal? Again, answering those purpose and scope type questions. This is how more you need more about this is how you define your methods, right? Once you understand those 5 Ws, now you know how to go collect your data. So understanding that is good. The analysis is how to make it quantitative. It's the human-oriented process. This is not where you're going to throw a bot or AI at it. A lot of people want to go throw a lot of AI at things. And while you can use AI to help build that report, you still need to be able to answer those questions of what the human asked. So do keep that in mind. And this is how you also start to contextualize the data and analyze the data and put the intelligence into it. That's the third step is probably the most important step of this whole process. Almost as important as the production, right? Production at the end of the day, this is the deliverable, right? This is what your customer, your clients are paying for. They are paying for that production. They're paying for that report at the end of the day. So no matter how you look at it, like I told myself that I wanted to be an ethical hacker and I wanted to hack things all day long and I wanted to pen test and do all the things you see on TV. Unfortunately, reality set in that, man, I got to do presentations, I got to do reports. This sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. Right. And it really wasn't for me. So I was like, I'm going to go back to my passion, which is open source intelligence and reconnaissance or whatever you want to call it. Right. Going out and finding things and reporting on those things. Well, then I realized I have to do a report again. So I'm right back where I started. So I started to learn how to be a better report writer, putting it on paper, building out slide decks, presentations, and telling the story. So it's basically about being a storyteller. That's the best way I can think to do it is be a good storyteller at the end of the day. And again, that's step 5, presenting your findings, going through all this. This is great stuff here and being able to get that feedback loop going, giving your stakeholders what's relevant and you're finding the data, right? That's where the analysis aspect comes in here. So all that said, the above 5 steps should elicit more questions from your stakeholders. Life cycle is never ending. It should keep going and keep going and keep going, right? They should always want to come back to you and say, hey, what about this? Or hey, can you take a look in this? Or hey, what about this over here? What are your thoughts about this? Right? You might start getting asked your opinions on certain things, right? And how much of a risk it is and things of that nature. So keep that in mind. I like to show the intelligence life cycle in a couple of ways. One, the circle. We saw all the 5 steps there, but then also breaking it down into, and I stole these obviously from resources, and I don't have my resource in the bottom of this one, but I can share it if I need to. But the objectives, right? This is that planning and direction. Like, what are your objectives, right? That's a key question to start asking the 5 Ws and all that. Get your direction, get your planning. And then collection, right? We talked about internal resources. We talked about technical resources and human sources, right? You may have to go to the dark web if you're getting into OSINT. You may need to learn how to do a lot of things on social media or how to get into forums. You're going to start thinking about your operational security or OPSEC, right? How do you get into these forums and not give away yourself, right? Not give away your organization, those kind of things. I see some people say they love report writing. It's amazing. Maybe I'll start sending my stuff to you and say, hey, write a report on this for me. I don't know. I don't like a report writing, but it's part of the task, right? And we got to get good at it in some way and find the way that works for you. at the end of the day. But again, like I mentioned, those different resources, right? How when you do your collection, where are you getting it from? Right? Network logs, scans, dark web, vulnerability databases are resources too, right? To go look through if you're looking at things. But then this kind of goes down into like what we call threat intelligence. You can call it any type of intelligence if you really want to, but that collection, the processing, the analysis, the dissemination, all fits in the same thing, right? A lot of people are calling this cyber threat intelligence in general. These departments are getting larger and larger, and the popularity is you're creating cyber fusion teams, right? That are these massive teams with IT and cybersecurity and fraud and loss prevention. It's all over the place, but it's growing and growing and growing. And then how does this all break down? Who are your departments? Who are the people you're going to be talking to? You're going to be talking to incident response, right? You're going to be talking to security operations, your vulnerability management teams, right? They're going to want to know, hey, what are the threat actors out there working on right now? What are the things that they're building exploits for, or testing against, right? Or selling on forums, right? These proof of concepts and stuff. Vulnerability management teams want to know that too. Your risk analysis teams, fraud management, security leadership. We talked about the CISOs, right? And even your CEOs and CFOs, and all the C-level people. But fraud management is a big one as well, from loss prevention. Third-party risk management's not on here, but you can kind of put it somewhere. Risk analysis potentially. But yeah, there's a lot of things in here that can these teams that you can start thinking about. And I see some comments in here about OSINT training on TCM Security Academy. Great resources for this as well. I love a lot of those. I could probably name off a few myself, but we'll continue with the presentation. But yeah, a lot of those courses are great courses on TCM Securities Academy. Angela Brown's amazing. I definitely agree with that statement. All right, so OSINT use cases, as we saw in that last slide, we saw some of those teams, right, of the different things down there, the teams that we could actually go with. And the one thing missing on this use case here is the third-party risk management type teams. Vendor management, whether they're old ones, whether they're new ones, it doesn't really matter. Like just making sure that, hey, is this new vendor we're about to spend $1 million with a good investment or a bad investment for us, right? Or were they going to leak all of our data all over the place because we didn't realize that they had been hacked 5 different times prior to doing business with them? The fact that they're still in business would be shocking too. But a lot of criminal investigations, law enforcement, people of interest, fugitive apprehension, evidence provision, all these things have an OSINT connection, whether you're a private investigator. Loss prevention, like I mentioned earlier, that's also going to be with your fraud intelligence teams and things of that nature. Cybercrime, threat assessments, whether it's individuals or events, executives, right? There's a big push right now for executive threat assessments and understanding the risk of what our executives are dealing with out there, and are there attacks potentially towards them. With all the things that we've heard in the news, a lot of companies took down their executive pages, which a lot of them have to have in place because of SEC for things and things of that nature, because they're public traded. But a lot of them took them down because they feared that their executives were at risk, and they didn't want to give out that information for free. Even though you could probably find it somewhere else. And the Wayback Machine is an amazing thing. So a lot of those companies that took down their executive pages, they probably didn't go to archive.org and the Wayback Machine and say, hey, can you take this down too, right? You can still find those as a threat actor, right? Very easily can be done. LinkedIn, they're still probably on LinkedIn, right, and posting where they work. It's all over the place, right? And there's other resources out there too that track and scrape all this stuff too, like a Rocket Reach. And I'll list some of those resources towards the end of things that you can utilize for doing some of this stuff. Intelligence gathering. This is where I kind of like, hey, this is where I want to like do some things. Is this threat actor targeting us, right, potentially, or what are they doing these days, or what's their and what are they into these days, right? Because threat actors tend to change what they're into. Some stick with fraud, some kind of migrate back and forth. Just depends on where the money's at a lot of times. But this is kind of those use cases, I would say, background things. Your HR teams hire companies to go and do background checks on companies. What if you could save your HR team money and do those background checks internally, right? And keep it in house? That'd be cool, because there's been breaches out there with those background check companies that have gotten breached, and all that data is out there now, right? All the data they collected. It's almost on par with the credit bureaus, right? Getting breached, right? They have a lot of that same type of data out there that we want to know about. So definitely keeping in mind the use cases that are out there for OSINT. How do you get into OSINT? All right, that's another question a lot of folks tend to ask me, is how do we get into OSINT? Like, how do I start? And what I always tell people is OSINT yourself, right? You know what's true. You know what you're going to find out there. potentially, or maybe you don't. Maybe you forgot about that account that you had when you were, 12, 13 years old that you didn't realize, you weren't supposed to have, maybe. But someone is going to know that's out there, right? It's going to be found and things of that nature. So keep that in mind that OSINT yourself. Go find what you don't know, go find what you do know and validate it, right? And keep track of that stuff, right? How much of your information is out there? Go look at a lot of those data aggregators that are, out there that you can just put a name in and it'll tell you all about everything about the person. Things like that's them. Things like cyber background checks. So check them out if you haven't. Put your name in there. OSINT yourself. OSINT family members, if they give you the okay to do it, a lot of times it's good to do that as well because you're also helping your family members be more secure about and more private with a lot of things they're doing. If you can educate them, that's a risk to you, right? Because if you're at a get together, a family get together, and people are taking pictures and posting them all over the place, I can find it, right? I will find it. And those are things that could give away locations. It could give away birthdays, right? Grandmas love saying, "Hey, happy birthday." Not to hate on grandmas, but it's not just grandmas, it's moms and other people too, aunts and uncles. But keep those in mind that that's giving away your birthday information even though it's not out there. I see someone just mentioned Michelle Kahn. Amazing OSINT individual. He's amazing. He's one of my heroes. I'm actually doing some training with him next month, so it's going to be awesome. Do other things like GeoGuessr. If you haven't messed around and play with GeoGuessr, go out there and do GeoGuessr. It's gonna educate you on landscapes and countries and all the things that are out there that you're just not probably focused on. You can strictly stay U.S. based if you want. You can look at other countries as well, but GeoGuessr is a great tool for doing those type of things where it's like they post a picture and say, "Hey, find me." Okay, cool. Practice by using GeoGuessr, right? Practice with your own stuff. Is how much information is in that photo that you just posted? Hopefully none. But you never know. You can do some other things like Trace Labs. Try Hack Me, Hack the Box. Trace Labs is a good thing because they're giving back to, the community. That it's trying to find missing individuals, right? So you can use your OSINT skills to then go try to find missing individuals that may be out there that need to be searched for, right? So you can practice your OSINT skills, and it's a CTF, so it's like they're trying to kind of gamify the whole thing, but at the same time, you can definitely learn while you're doing it. Try Hack Me's got some good stuff on OSINT. Hack the Box has a whole OSINT section as well. If you're not familiar with Hack the Box, so list of folks here to watch, to go follow and watch. I need to update this list. I need to get Michelle Kahn on this list as well. There's definitely some good folks on here to kind of start with and then branch out because these people are following OSINT folks as well. So keep that in mind. This is a small list, so there's a much larger list out there. So once you're following a few of these, go find the other ones out. Gary Rudell, amazing. I love some of his stuff that he's been doing utilizing OSINT, so it's a good mention there as well. Training certifications, they're all over the place. A lot of these you're going to find you're not going to get like a certification that's going to be recognized, all over the place. But it's more about getting the training, the skill sets built up. Intel Techniques is a great one, like I mentioned earlier. There's definitely some other ones out there that are more recognizable. You could go do SANS. I have nothing against SANS except for SANS pricing. That's about all I can say about SANS, but you can get a lot out of them. If you've got a company that's willing to pay it, take advantage of that company and have them pay for it if you can. If not, there's a lot of free stuff out there. Intel Techniques is not free, but it's under $1,000 last time I checked. So that's a good price for training, in my opinion. And all the other ones that were mentioned there, the anti-siphon training, things like that nature. They have the Cyber Mentor, that's great training as well. The MyOSINT training, great stuff. I think Web Reacher is doing a lot of that stuff today. Micah Hoffman and some others that are in this group are doing a lot of the MyOSINT training stuff there. And you've got Michelle Kahn, who's doing OSINT training as well. I think the new sites like just hacking.net. I don't know for a fact. Maybe someone can put it into post if they know what I'm talking about. But that one just got started by John Hammond, I believe it was. There it is. They just posted to justhacking.com. Great stuff. They got that. Michelle Kahn's doing his training on there right now. He's starting to build that out more and more. You can also go to Wild West Hacking Fest for some of his training as well, up in Black Hills and Deadwood and all that stuff. He's also doing one in Denver, I think, this next month. So, not that I'm stalking him by any means or know where he's at all times. So, let's talk about some of the tools because obviously we talked about like how do we get into it. We talked about what OSINT was and stuff, but what about all the tools? There's a lot of tools out there, and I will always tell people at one time OSINT framework was not being upkept, wasn't getting updated as much. They've gone through and done a lot of changes to it recently and done a lot of updates to it. Maybe they heard someone else complaining about it because I'm not as important as the others that are out there doing it, but are doing OSINT. But They definitely have updated this. This is a good starting point if you don't know where to start with the information that you have, whether it's a domain, whether it's a username, whether it's an email address. They have a lot of it. I mean, you have license plate information, things of that nature. You can go here and get a good start with the OSINT framework. This is a great. At the end of the day, what I tell people is, while this is a good start, build your own tool sets, right? Even with pen testing and ethical hacking and hacking in general, you're going to eventually find tools that you like and that work best for your methods and techniques and processes and workflows. Build your own tool sets, right? Build your own tool sets from OSINT, these OSINT tools, right? You may not use every single one of these. That's fine. You don't need to. But I would tell you that you also might want to go check every single one of these tools sometimes when you are doing your investigations, because the great example is Google versus Bing versus Yahoo versus Yandex, all going to be a little bit different in how they do things and how they scrape things and what they scrape and what they show to you. I mean, recently you've had issues with Yahoo, or not Yahoo, but Bing and Google. Google did it first, and I think Bing just did it too, where they've taken away the cached sections of their searches. Well, that's okay, because you could go out and build your own search engine, right? You could use something like I think it's SearchNG. SearchNG will allow you to kind of build your own private search engine and tell it what engines you want to use and search and keep it private. You can build it out to like a digital ocean box and do your own thing. That's a great tool to use for doing your own searches and keeping your searches kind of private. So you're not doing everything through Google, you're not doing everything through Bing and Yahoo, but you can still utilize those engines to go out and do the searches for you, just not exposing yourself to those particular tools when you're doing it. And again, that goes back into the OPSEC talk that I could definitely ramble on a little bit. Keeping that in mind, just use the tools. Don't just Google it. Don't stop at page one. Go to stage two. Go to stage, page three. Get to page 10. Sometimes, you'd be surprised at what you could find on page 15. Sometimes what gets buried sometimes on the internet. So keep that in mind, and then check all the other different search engines. I'm looking to see if there's any more questions in here. I'm not seeing any questions. License plates are hot this week. Yeah, license plates are all over the place right now, especially with the ALPRS PN hacks and things that are going on right now, and the leakage of data and potentially and that kind of stuff. That's a huge topic right now in the OSINT world. So find those tools that can do those reverse searches for you, or databases that are out there. I'm not going to tell you how to hack them, but they do exist. Other tools that you can look at, unprofessional, yeah. Other tools you can look at, some of them are well known, some of them not so well known. ID Crawl, PQ, Holia, White Pages, Ghunt, which is basically a great Google tool. Family Tree Now, which is the one with the little tree, the person kind of being the trunk there. That's Family Tree Now. They're great. I'll have a list of a lot of these sites on my last page, and we'll share it with the group as well. Sherlock is a great tool. Name check. What's my name app? What is a solid, amazing tool that I typically start off with usernames. EPOS, which takes advantage of a lot of the Ghunt stuff, the Holia stuff as well. Rocket Reach, Google Maps, which we're going to dig into here a little bit later with Google Maps and kind of look at some things. But these are just tools that I would say, hey, you can start with these tools as well. Cluster Maps is a good resource, not great. Sometimes firewalls tend to block it for reasons, but it's a good tool to use sometimes if you're struggling with some things. Let's see here. Google Dorking. Someone's mentioned Google Dorking. Google Dork. Learn how to Google Dork. If you don't know how to Google Dork, there's a lot of great resources out there. There's a lot of tools that people have built out there, like Dork Search, I believe is one of them. It will help you kind of build out your searches. You just check what you want. It'll build out the search for you. You can copy and paste it and throw it in Google or do the search right there. It's a good tool to learn, but if anything, learn how to use Google as much as possible. There you go. There's a Try Hack Me version on Google Dorking. So the tools are out there. Go to the trainings. I could probably do a complete talk on Google Dorking as well, but it's only so much time we have. I already have 47 slides here, so I don't want to bore anyone too much. And yes, even AI tools. AI is a big topic. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's buying into it. You either hate it, you love it, or you're kind of in the middle. I'm kind of in the middle. I don't hate it. I don't love it, but it does have a purpose, right? It can speed up a lot of things and processes around the way. Trace Labs, Joe Gray from the Ascension, great trainer as well. Done a lot of his training. So it's a great mention there. I see in the comments. But AI tools are great. GeoSpy is a great reverse image searching tool. Not perfect by any means. They're getting better as they've built more and more things out. Great tool. Arta AI, great tool as well. But again, AI has its faults at times. They're getting better as the models grow and grow and grow, and we start throwing more stuff at it, right? And not just junk, but actually like good stuff. There's a lot of, I think early on in AI stages, a lot of junk that it was scraping, a lot of junk data that it was pulling in. Is why we had all the people in the generative AI with like 6 or 7 fingers or toes, and things were crazy, right? Yeah. Um, AI for reporting, yeah, it definitely can speed up the process with the report writing and things like that. I've used it myself, so great stuff there for that. I'm not an AI guy, so I'm not. I won't go too deep into that. I see a question here: Are most reports from scratch, or do you have a standard template? It's a great question, and it could be both, right? I have built some standard templates for reports. Those have been more like daily reports, monthly reports, weekly reports. I do have standardized templates for that. I'm actually working on utilizing, you can hate me for this or not, but utilizing Google Docs, having a Google spreadsheet or Google Sheet, and then having a Google Doc itself. And then anytime I enter in data into the Google spreadsheet or the sheet itself, it will then yank that and then throw it over into my report for me and kind of build things out as I'm dropping in new information, right? And then I can always go and edit that sheet and pull out what information I validated, what information I couldn't validate, and I can move things around. And then that would actually start structuring my report, and then I could go in and start putting in my summaries, my briefs, and things of that nature. But yeah, I would say once you start building your reports from scratch, you'll find out that you'll want to kind of create a template out of those and create those templates because you're going to be again rinsing and repeating your reports as you build things out. Great question, by the way. And I get long-winded on my responses sometimes, so I do apologize. Sometimes I don't know when to stop talking. All right. Don't see any other questions popping in here on the screen or in chat right now. So either I've put you to sleep, or you're getting dinner, or something else. I don't know. We'll just continue. So this is the mock investigation. This isn't the slide I wanted. It's actually this slide. Okay, cool. I didn't update my slides completely before I got to this point. So this mock investigation, what we're going to do here is we have an executive, right? And maybe this is on an executive team. And with recent events that have been going on, we're going to say we want to make sure that our executives aren't a risk to themselves or a risk to our organization. So we need to know what kind of things they're posting and things of that nature. Now, during an investigation, when you're researching an executive, things like this, you would go down the path of finding all their social media, right? Whether they're giving it to you directly or you're finding it to see what you can find, right? You could do it a couple of ways and say, all I have is your name and I know where you work. I'm going to go see what I can find about you, right? Because I got that from your executive page on your website. So we want to make sure this executive isn't posing a threat to themselves, right? So we've done our due diligence. We've kind of gone through, we found their social media, we found some forums they were on, we found some things, we saw what they were posting out there. They made a claim to us, very bold claim is they never post anything that could put them at risk or give their location away, where they live, their house is private, it's under a trust or an LLC or something of that nature, right? They're really trying to like hide themselves. And they've done their due diligence as well. But for whatever reason, they think, well, you can't find me based on a photo, right? I don't post anything that would ever give me away. So the goal here really is to educate them, but it's also just to identify and determine, is our executive a risk to themselves or are they a risk to our organization? Are they giving away information they don't think they're actually giving away, right? So there was an image that was posted on a public chat, and we got that image. And this image didn't really give a lot of details away initially. When we look at it face value, we're like, hey, yeah, there's not much here. Let's get into this. So here's the image, right? I don't know, you guys can zoom into it if you can. I'm not sure how close you kind of see it. And typically I ask the question is, what do you see? Right? And you can post some of that stuff in the chat if you'd like. But what do you see that would give away some information about our executive here? Our executive, obviously, they're on a porch potentially, and they took this picture. And they're like, this is how I'm spending my weekend, right? This is it. Well, usually when I'm in a group, face to face, I'll wait for people to raise their hand and chat and spit out a bunch of stuff. But I'll kind of go through it right now, right? And the things that we can see, right? The things that we can recognize. Well, there's a phone number, obviously, right? There's an area code on there. There's a license plate that's exposed, right? There's the Morris Jenkins locations. People are throwing in there. These are great things, right? The Morris Jenkins stuff, the zooming in on the license plate. These are all the things that we're thinking about. And again, when I tell people to look up pictures like this, there's layers to these pictures. There's what's in front of you, there's what's in the background, and there's also what's in the middle, right? So what's in front of us? What's in front of us is Morris Jenkins Plumbing, right? What's in front of us? A phone number. These things are all in front of us. But what are the things that we have here? Deciphering that tree. Right. We could, I'm not great at the landscape type stuff and the identifying plants and stuff, but those are things that you can do. The problem with the tree and the landscape problems that you have, especially in, I look at this, I'm like, okay, cool. I can kind of tell what kind of community this is. We have these all over Texas and North Texas area, and they plant stuff that doesn't belong in the environment, and we usually die out within 3 to 5 to 10 years, and they have to replant more native stuff. So if this is a younger community, those plants may not be native and they're probably going to die, right? So these trees may misidentify a location because we're like, hey, that's a tree that I always see in Texas. Boom, that's a Texas tree. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, right? So keeping those things in mind as well, especially when we're looking at all the information this thing does. Someone mentioned the metadata, right? Perfect. Now, the issue with metadata that you're going to find out if you get into this is a lot of social media sites strip that away these days. When you're posting them on Facebook and Twitter or X, or they strip all that data out these days to keep their you know customers, clients secure, private, right? So keep that in mind. But if someone were to send this picture to you directly and they didn't turn off the geolocation type information, that's definitely information you could grab. They posted on a form that has a lax of security, definitely pull out that meta information, pull out the geolocation, find it, right? Go after the metadata. That's step one. Find out if there's any metadata. Find out what you can find. Step two, look at the picture, find out what you can find. We saw the Morris Jenkins, the phone numbers, the license plates. There's an NFL team logo on that on the bottom left, that right passenger panel there. There's a logo there, right? That tells me that it's probably sponsored by an NFL team, which looks like the Carolina Panthers logo. So that's telling me we're probably dealing with someone in North Carolina. Potentially, the phone number and things like that kind of give it away as well. Then Morris Jenkins, you guys are doing your own stuff in the background. You're going to find out that, yeah, that's probably in North Carolina. And we'll get to that here in a moment. There's other things in this picture though as well. The house is behind us. The other information, we zoom into things, are house numbers we can find. These things are all coming in. I love it. People are already doing their research. Simple, right? It's North Carolina. Perfect. But where in North Carolina? Where is that house located? What's the address, right? What neighborhood is that? Because that's what we're trying to go after, right? Those are the things we want to go after. Morris Jenkins could operate, in many locations, right? They could even operate out of state because maybe this was a cold time of year and water heaters were going out left and right, and Morris Jenkins expanded, where they were working at. Those are things to think about as well. They could be operating outside of North Carolina right now. A lot of information is what we're getting at, right? We can see the phone number, we can see the names of the company, we can see all this information. I will identify some things later that you probably didn't think about looking at. But like, what can we see? Morris Jenkins, the truck's in North Carolina. It's got Carolina plates. So we know it's in the United States. We know it's in North Carolina or in that area. This is residential, right? This is a residential place. It's not a business location. It's a residential place. There are sidewalks, right? Keep that in mind. That's very important on the path we're about to take. Sidewalks are important. Partial addresses on mailboxes, right? When we zoom into some of these, we'll see partial addresses. So self observations. This is the things that, based on experience and doing this a lot, is this is a newer, younger neighborhood, right? This looks very much like a lot of these communities that are being built out in all over the place. This is a newer, younger. I would put this at 10, 15, maybe 20 years. Is young. It's young compared to most things, right? HOA, people are mentioning HOAs. Great thing. A township, village, right, is usually what they have in these community names. Home or property owner association. Someone mentioned HOA. Keep that in mind because HOAs have websites and you can go visit those things. And a lot of times they don't have a verification process that's good to create an account on an HOA website and go and harvest more information. I'm not telling you to go do that, right? Don't go do that. But I'm just telling you that some of those HOA sites aren't that secure and they leak a lot of data out, whether that's meetings, whether that's, hey, mailboxes have to have this lettering on it. Houses have to be painted in this color and they have to be painted in this trim, or you need these type of plants. They have a lot of those things that you can go look at and go, okay, this matches my neighborhood, right? Clubhouses, communities, pools, we also see that we don't see any driveways, right? We don't see any driveways. So what's that mean? Garages in the rear, right? Decent size. So yeah, you can see some trees and stuff and a decent size back there in the far back. Really good. Good eye. Looking at things in the background. Don't always look at things that are directly in front of us. So you have to break these pictures down in layers. And as we break it down in layers, we zoom into things, right? We saw that, hey, yes, North Carolina plate. We have a license plate number. We're looking at the mailboxes. As we zoom in these mailboxes and start looking at numbers, we could be looking at, okay, well, what do those numbers look like, right? The house numbers on those mailboxes could be a 1 7, could be a 2, could be a 4 somewhere in there, could be a 5. We could look at different things, but we can also build a range, right? We know we see 4 digits, it could be 5 digits. So by looking at this and doing a little more digging, my guess is where it's probably 1700 to 1799 or 17,000 to 17, 999, right? Those kind of my self assumptions that I started putting into what I was looking at. And this is important when we start digging into what I'm about to go into. The architecture of the houses, right? It gives away a lot of things. A lot of these mass-produced houses, though, you'll find them almost everywhere. They're very cookie cutter, but there may be some uniqueness to some of these houses that kind of give it away on where it may be built. Older houses are easier based on it. So it's an older house. A lot of times it was very unique to the areas. More and more of these mass-produced houses all look the same. Unfortunately, they're very cookie cutter. So keep that in mind as well when you do it. So we start digging into it, and when my research went into, well, what are the traditional type fonts you would typically see on mailboxes, right? What are the things that you would look? I found a website that was dedicated to mailbox fonts and mailbox stuff, right? So I started looking at traditional and these things and finding, okay, well, that would, if it was that shape, then it's probably a 2 or it could be a 7, right? Those are the things we kind of start looking at as I'm digging into these numbers and looking at the shapes a little bit. Could it be a 7? Could it be a 2? Right? Someone's got a song stuck in their head. I apologize if I did that to you. But the numbers are good because also if we're looking at those HOA sites, they may have a policy guide that says your mailbox must have this number and it must be in this font, right? So keep that in mind on what we're looking at here. At the same time, as we could identify by using HOA databases and the back ends of things and policies and guides at the same time. Now, based on the house types, neighborhood setups, you know, could be a super fancy 3 as well. It could be newer home. I initially put this at 15 to 20 years old. I would say 15 to 20, based on manufacturer suggested life warranties on water heaters. Again, AI gave this to me, right? It says 8 to 12 years. So that varies on locations, but a new water heater could mean that this neighborhood is in between that 8 to 12 years, right? If this is a new neighborhood or if this is a second hot water heater, then we're thinking about 16 to 24 years potentially, right? On average. Not perfect science, but you can do research and say, hey, Google, Bing, whoever, what's the lifespan of a hot water heater? Why would someone be getting a hot water heater replaced, right? Usually because it goes out. How long does it typically last, right? Gives you some information to start thinking about how old that neighborhood might be. Because then you could be looking at data with inside of county records and things like that of permits on houses being built and what was being built 10, 15 years ago. They may not have the data. They may have it. Who knows? Township or a village, HOA or a property owner. All right. So homeowners or a property owner association. A neighborhood with a clubhouse or a pool. Most of these neighborhoods in this shape typically have pools, community houses, clubhouses, and there's a garage in the rear, right? So yeah, a properly maintained water heater can last much longer. I agree. I've had my water heater just got replaced and I had it for 25 years. So I agree with that. If it's properly maintained, perfect. It can last you a long time. On average, again, based on manufacturer stuff, though. This is not rocket science or anything like that. We're not trying to be precise, but again, yeah, it could be 20 plus years. Who knows? We're going on averages here. We're working on. So one of the AI tools I mentioned earlier is the GeoSpy app, right? We put that in here, and when I put this in here, it immediately said, "Hey, it's North Carolina. It's Morrisville." Right? It gave us some information about the actual truck itself, what we saw here. It's great. Wasn't accurate, close, but it wasn't perfect, right? So that was the AI aspect of this, a little bit of being able to see if that would help us speed the process up a little bit, right? It was good, wasn't perfect. Mooresville was not in the location we were looking for. Unfortunately, we'll get to how we got that area as well. And then looking at the Morris Jenkins information, right? So you go to the website, they had a little chat bot on there. So we utilize that as well to kind of go on there and ask them some questions. And I asked them, "Hey, do you service the Morrisville, North Carolina area?" No, they don't. So I knew what the GeoSpy gave me was not accurate based on this. But again, if there was a lot of hot water heaters going out and it was really, really cold and Morris Jenkins decided to expand their service area, maybe they did service Morrisville, but the bot didn't know that. But we also start looking at the Morris Jenkins website and we find out there's a number. We validated that's the same number on the truck. We also looked at the counties they serve, right? And so we start looking at we know counties they serve. So there's a handful. There's 7. We can look through those, right? We can start looking through those and do the manual work if we want to, and start looking through all the different cities and things as well, the different towns. And we can look at Google Maps and say, do we see patterns of things, right? And we'll talk about patterns here in a moment. I love patterns, whether that's just scrolling down a bunch of numbers and seeing a pattern happening, or data, or taking a aerial shot of a neighborhood and kind of mapping that out in our heads, right? When we think talking about what we were talking about earlier, those things that we saw in the images, right? Residential areas, sidewalks, garages in the back, communities with pools, clubhouses. Keep those in mind. Map that out in your head, what that looks like. How would you put that on a piece of paper? And how would you tell a tool how to look that up, right? Take that in mind. Let's see here. 23. So what do we do with this information? We have all that information that we just talked about. Like, what do we do? Any other questions so far? What are some ethical considerations when conducting OSINT? Great question. Obviously, the goal is not always to dox people. We don't want to dox people and throw this stuff on out in the public, right? There's a goal, there's a reason we're doing this, right? Whether you're a private investigator, you're doing it because you're doing it for law enforcement, you're doing it for your company. Keeping that data safe and secure and private, just like with anything else, and making sure it goes to the right people. So one thing that I initiated in my templates and when I'm doing my reports is the traffic light protocol, right? TLP. Is it green? Is it yellow? Is it red? Is it orange, amber? All those terminologies. Learn the traffic light protocol and understand, like, where do you share this information, right? Your company should already have some type of either data classification or sharing classifications or policies or processes on how you share data. Make sure you're in guidelines with those. Don't post things on public to dock somebody or anything like that. That's what a lot of the script kiddies and hackers do. But yet, if it feels wrong, it probably is what I tell people. When in doubt, if you work for an organization that has a legal team, go knock on their door, right? They'd be happy to answer a question and happy to help you. They may ask you why you're asking the question. They may start asking you more questions, but that could just be part of your intelligence life cycle, right? And you say, hey, I did my job. I asked some questions. I gave you some information. You asked more questions. We're rinsing and repeating right here. So keep that in mind. But yeah, that's a great question. Keeping that in mind when you're doing these investigations and storing your data properly, making sure it's not exposed. And it's my data doesn't live in Google Drive, even though I have those templates in Google Drive. I'm building a lot of that stuff there, but also I do a lot of things locally as well. So I don't want to make sure that stuff is not exposed to the internet. It's not left in a Google Drive and publicly available potentially, even by mistake. So keep that in mind when you're doing your reports and things of that nature, and keep your own information away from it and separate as best as possible utilizing operational security. And if it doesn't feel wrong, but it's actually wrong, you're in the wrong. You go, well, yeah, possibly. All right. Let's see here. Next steps. So I started in this particular case, and in this particular reverse image searching, capture the flag, whatever you want to call it, right? We're going after this executive, trying to see, they post this picture, we're going to locate their house. What are my qualifiers? I'm building out qualifiers. I'm going to use 2 tools here: Google or Google Maps and OpenStreetMaps or Overpass Turbo. If you haven't heard of Overpass Turbo, check it out. Great tool. It utilizes OpenStreetMaps. OpenStreetMaps is a great open source mapping tool. You can utilize that. You don't have to use Google Maps. You can just use OpenStreetMap for a lot of things. The issues are, and we're separating the two out, is Google Map obviously is Google. It's ran by Google and it's serviced and everything. The cars are driving all over the place, taking pictures constantly. OpenStreetMap is community driven, right? So it's community serviced. It's every data point that's in there is produced by a community, and you are the community, and you submit it. If you want your house on there, you mark your house on there. Now somebody else may mark your house on there for you. You can always go in there and say, hey, remove that, just like you can with Google and all the other map tools that are out there, Apple Maps and Bing Maps and things like that. You can always say, hey, remove or blur out my house location, right? You're not going to remove it off there, but you can get it blurred. So keeping that in mind is, one is community, one is enterprise, so to speak. But what are my qualifiers here? So the qualifiers, I'm going to go off of a community center, clubhouse, or a pool with inside or close to my house. The garage access is in the back, right? It's in the rear. And then the address range. We're going to use the address range that we came up with, or what I came up with earlier, and we're going to put this into the OpenStreetMap tools. What you'll find is Google is much harder to do that with than something like OpenStreetMaps. Google, you need to kind of know your address, you need to know your coordinates, you need to know the general area, and you're going to be doing a lot of zooming in and zooming out. Whatever you do, whatever tools you use, base it off of your skill set or go learn a new tool, right? In this particular event, I learned more about OpenStreetMaps and the backend programming than I probably cared to know, but it was good information for me to learn because now I can use that tool more efficiently in my searching. If you guys have ever heard of Jose Monkey, check him out. He utilizes OpenStreetMaps for like everything, builds out his queries and finds a lot of things. He's got crazy programming skills when it comes to OpenStreetMap, and it's programming. And essentially, you're building out, kind of if-then statements and qualifiers and whatnot. But yeah, it's programming in a way. But we're going to utilize these two tools. We're going to utilize Google or an OpenStreetMaps. A couple of questions here. I see. One question is OSINT a skill that you can get hired, that can get you hired? Yeah, it can. OSINT is a skill that could get you hired, right? What I would tell people that are looking for jobs or you're putting an application is go research that company, right? Find out what kind of problems they've been having. Find out have they had breaches, right? Maybe they're hiring you for a reason, or they're interviewing you for a reason. Be the answer to their questions, right, or their problems, right? Understand what they're going through potentially based on what their news articles are saying about them, right? Learn and map out your hiring manager a little bit, right? Understand their background and kind of connect with them a little bit while you're doing that. So you could take that OSINT knowledge and do the research or the reconnaissance on the company you're applying for, and I wouldn't say social engineer, but you're kind of social engineering by using this information to stir up conversation or elicit more things. You're pretexting a lot of this stuff. So you could utilize the OSINT skills to do some things like that. So it is. Where are the OSINT certifications that are recognized by employees? What are the OSINT certifications that are recognized by employers? SANS would probably be the most recognizable one out there. I think there's a few other ones that are gaining popularity. The Intel Techniques one, I think, in my opinion, is gaining popularity. I think more people are starting to look into this. But again, a lot of those that are recognized are sanctioned, and they have an organization of about that kind of manage and monitor them, like a IC squared, SANS, things of that nature. Those are the ones that are being recognized. But at the end of the day, it's okay that they're not recognizing all the certs out there. You need to just show your skills, right, as best as you can. Great question. And there's not a ton of them that are being recognized by employers. Most of them are hired for other things these days, but OSINT is starting to gain some traction. So let's look at some of these tools. Looking at Google Maps, you're gonna bang your head on the desk, on the wall. You're gonna be punching walls. You're gonna be kicking. I don't want to say anything like kicking kittens or anything. I already said it. So don't kick any kittens or puppies or anything like that. But you're gonna get frustrated with Google Maps in some aspects. In this particular incident, in searching for things, right? Because you're going to be doing a lot of zooming in and zooming out, but you're also going to be looking for patterns, right? So we knew we are in North Carolina, right? And what I did a search for is I just honed in on North Carolina, and I wanted to hone in on the area that I thought that we were in, right? Whether it was Charlotte or what the area that we were looking at. And I said, okay, let me use Google and just do a search for Clubhouse and see what comes up. Now, it could get a lot of weird stuff, but when I did that, it's more than 40. I have 40 listed here, but there's a ton of them. And so what I had to do is start zooming into all these different clubhouses, right? And then looking at the neighborhoods, and I had to see, does it match my pattern, right? Is it have the residential area? Does it have a sidewalk? Does it have a garage in the back? Does the street numbers match, right? Can I find a neighborhood or a block that has the street numbers that align with what my IDs are or my qualifiers are, right? So I started throwing this into there and just doing searches. You're zooming in and out, zooming in and out. You're gonna do a lot of that utilizing Google and doing it this way. But I'm looking for patterns, right? And so by utilizing Google and zooming in and zooming out, I'm going, okay, my qualifiers, right? It's a clubhouse, community, is a pool. Check. I have that. That's in the top left there. There's a pool there, or a community center, or something of that nature, right? It's there. Garage access in the rear alley. No, in this neighborhood, the garages were in the front of the houses, not in the back. So I didn't make them my qualification. I wanted to at least hit two of the three qualifiers before I dug into it. Does it have my address range? When I was digging in this neighborhood, none of the blocks match my address ranges that I liked. So we move on. This doesn't match our it doesn't hit our qualifiers that we put earlier. So here's another one. Another one that I zoomed in on. Clubhouse pool? No. Wasn't close by. It wasn't even, within a quarter mile of the housing here. Garage access in the back? Yes. We have garages in the back. It's hard to see here, but they are in the back of the houses. You'll see that you have like three streets, like boom, boom, boom. And that middle one is the alleyway. It actually says alley in the street name. So they gave it a street name and an alley name. Isn't in my address range. It wasn't when I was digging into this. The houses did not meet those requirements, 2 out of 3 requirements. So, question: why is OSINT so much fun? I don't know. To be honest, my background is in network administration, and I got into cybersecurity, got into threat hunting, and really is more about the hunt than anything else and finding stuff. When I was doing network administration in school districts, I had to go hunt down threats within our school, in our network, and identify where they were sourcing from because we didn't have all the fancy tools that we have today. It was a lot of manual work, but a lot of that passion became manual work for me, and that's where my OSINT skills, my reconnaissance type skills, hunting skills. So it's really about hunting for me. That's why it's so much fun to me. Is I get to go on this hunt with little information and build a story out of it, and I can answer the questions you want me to answer. Hopefully, not always, and you may not have an answer all the time. You can be wrong, or you just don't have the information to fulfill the request either. So you're not always going to check all the boxes. Great question though. So this one didn't match. This particular one didn't match. So I did it again. Like, okay, cool. Let's pull back. Let's look at the cities, right? Same type of search, but let's look at the cities that the Morris Jenkins website said they service, right? So we can start drilling into these cities on Google Maps, and then when we start looking for clubhouses with inside those cities, right? And we start seeing some things on here, and we start, okay, we can filter it down. So again, we went really wide, and then we started just narrowing it down with the information that we had. My camera somewhere in here, and there's my hands, and we can narrow it down, right? With taking that additional data, the information, and just narrowing it down as much as possible. Start wide and narrow and get to a narrow. So that's what I started doing here. I'm narrowing it down because I wasn't getting anywhere that I was doing. So it made my list shorter, and we started digging in, right? Digging into something like this, and we find some things like, okay, cool. Does it match and stuff? Does it have my it's got my pool? Does it have the houses? Does it have the garages in the back? Potentially. This one was interesting to me, right? We had a pool, we had some houses, and then we kind of got to a point where I'm like, okay, this might be it, potentially. So we drilled down into in Google Maps and we started looking and it says, hey, do we find a street that has the 1700 or 1799 or 17,000 to 17,999, right? Do we have those blocks? And we did in this particular one. So eventually with Google, we find this. The question is, what's the longest time it took you to complete a hunt? What's the shortest? I mean, I've been able to find things in like 30 minutes, maybe faster. Just depends on the individual. And if they've got really bad OPSEC, operational security, and they just blast the internet with everything, it can be really super easy, right? If they had a bunch of, if I have an email address and they were in a bunch of data breaches or leaks, I could speed that process up fairly quickly too and have more usernames to go off of and find things, depending on what the task is. I've had other hunts that have gone multiple days because I needed to answer the question, but I needed more information to be able to answer that question. So you just kind of dig deeper and deeper and you go down the rabbit holes. And one of the things that I always tell people is you're going to go down rabbit holes. The best thing you can always learn to do and do yourself is pull yourself out of that rabbit hole and just pause, right? Take a break, come back with a fresh set of eyes, and maybe even some ideas on how to continue your searches with the data that you've collected along the way by going down some of those rabbit holes. So it's good, but be able to get yourself out of the rabbit holes. So it could take multiple days, it could take minutes sometimes. Just depends on what you're looking at, right? And what your goal is. But great question. So this neighborhood, utilizing Google Maps, I was able to find a short list of cities and clubhouses, and then we found this location utilizing Google Map, and this looks like it could be our location. So we're going to dig a little deeper into this, and we're going to go and does it meet all of our qualifications? Does it have a clubhouse? Yes. The little red pinpoint down there in the bottom right hand corner is the clubhouse that we saw in the higher level view. As we drill down, we will see that we have alleyways behind our houses, meaning that we have garages back there potentially. And it looks like, based on the image, we do have those alleyways back there. And it was in our address range, right? That 1700 to 1799 to 17,000. We had those ranges that we were looking for, and we found this area that had our address range in it. So we're going to take a look at this one a little deeper, and we're going to go down it, but we're also going to look at the OpenStreetMap. This was strictly with Google Maps, and this one probably took me a few hours because I was zooming in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. Long, long time. But can we speed that process up? Yeah, we definitely could. We could utilize OpenStreetMaps, because in OpenStreetMaps, we can put those qualifiers into the language on the backend utilizing Overpass Turbo, and we can utilize that programming to search through the data, right? It's basically a query that we're building, putting qualifiers in there to build it out. Now, what does that look like? Or what is OpenStreetMaps? There are elements to OpenStreetMaps, right? We're going to kind of dig deep into OpenStreetMaps a little bit. Since I learned something, you have to learn something about OpenStreetMaps. Nodes, a node is a point on the map. It could be a restaurant, it could be a tree, it could be a house, it could be a garage, it could be anything can be a node on the maps, right? A way is a line. It's a line or an area. It could be a road. It could be a stream. Could be a lake or a building, potentially. But there's a way, a waypoint, right? The bounding boxes is kind of like your windows. Like when you're in Google Maps and you're looking at a box and you say search for restaurants in this box, that's your bounding box, right? And you can expand it and you can make it search. You can do it by latitude and longitude lines. You could do it by utilizing the box window that you have on your screen. You can do it in a few different ways with them. And the around function here, or search query, allows you to say, I want to find a clubhouse, or I want to find a garage, but it needs to be around this location within a certain feet, inches, whatever you're going to use, miles. You can say, hey, I need a house, but it needs to be around a clubhouse within a quarter mile, right? You can put these qualifiers in there. So we start thinking about all that information we were gathering from the picture and putting it in our elements and building out a query for this. We'll go through that here in a moment. There are tags. So when you're building out these things and you're posting and you're adding things to OpenStreetMaps, you're tagging things as well, right? You're saying, hey, this is a building. Hey, this is a residential road or a highway. This is a service road. This is a house. This is asphalt. This is a track. This is a tree. Right? You're tagging these things with this. And then there's desktop editors. So you take those tags and that knowledge you have, then you can start adding to the community. You can edit things with inside the community and say, hey, someone mislabeled or mistagged something. You could put a request in to have something retagged. And you can utilize the desktop editors. They even have some mobile editors as well that you can utilize on your phone if you wanted to. Up to you, but they exist and they are out there. So this is Overpass Turbo with my initial query that I had built out, and this particular one gave us a lot. I was like, hey, give me clubhouses in this bounding box. Bam. It gave me a lot. And I'm like, I need to kind of like drill this down a little bit. So I have to kind of revamp my qualifiers and basically work on that programming a little bit. I'm not going to go too deep into the programming and what I did and things like that. I think I do have a page on here kind of talking about it, maybe. But when I redid my programming or my logic in my query, essentially, I won't say programming as much anymore. It's more logic in my query, right? When I redid it, it cleaned it up. And now I only have these. And this is more manageable, right? Once I put all my qualifiers and I got it built out right, this is what it came up with, and it matched all my stuff. So this is amazing because now I can like focus on 8 things versus focusing on 100 things, right? Even if this is wrong, I can always go back to my query or my logic and restructure and rebuild it. So this is my variables. These are the things that I set up. So this is the overpass turbo logic that I kind of put in. I created some variables in there and said, hey, I'm going to create a variable that's called .alley. I'm going to create a variable that's which is leisure equals swimming pool. I'm going to turn that into pool. I'm using the bounding box. I'm going to create some other things with inside my bounding box. I'm going to then give it some regex and say, here's my address to my house number, and I need it to be 17. Start with 17. Yeah, we're we're getting more technical than I wanted to get, but this logic here does kind of map out my mind and what I was putting in the queries. So I used a 17, then put some regex in there, 0 through 9, and it needed to be, a few more characters. It could be 2, it could be 3. We adjust things as we go. And then I put some other searching elements in there, a swimming pool. Then we start utilizing the around function, right? With that around function, and we start saying, hey, I need an alley that's around 15 meters of the home address, right? Or I can use one that says, hey, I need a pool that's around 800 meters from my home address. I can use these stacked on top of each other, or I can use them separately depending on what. So I end up coming up with, which is the last one, which says I need, my search is basically going to be an alleyway that's within 15 meters of my house, but then also around 800 meters of um, the pool, right? As long as my house number, which is within inside these parameters as well, right? So it's got to be that 17,000 to 17,999 range, right? So I need my house number range has to be within 800 meters of the pool and within 15 meters of an alley, right? So house, that's the logic. That makes any sense. It makes sense in my head, and that the other we'll go back. So this is what we started off with, and when I got my logic to the very last thing, this is what we got, right? So we got those more cleaned up type thing. So again, houses, 15 meters of an alleyway, and 800 meters away from a pool. So when we did this, we looked in, we found in OpenStreetMap or on the Overpass Turbo, we found a house number that was within 15 meters of an alleyway and 800 meters of a pool. So instead of going back and forth in Google Maps, we could have spent our time with the logic in this query with OpenStreetMaps. And you get really good with this, you start finding things really fast, because then you start learning all the tags, you start learning all the ways and the node naming collector and how to search through this and how to program and put that logic in there. You can speed up your searches for location baseline. So geo, right? So geo, you'll be able to get really, really good at this. So this is the same location that we found in Google Maps. When we did all the back and forth in Google Maps took me a few hours. This also took me a few hours, but I learned something. I learned a lot of things on how to search faster in this than searching fast and slower with inside of Google Maps. So the idea is, if you can learn something, use the tools and the skill sets you have, but also try to learn something. So as we navigate down this Carlton Way Road, we're going to kind of use Google Maps. We're going to go back to Google Maps because it's great, and we're going to search right through it, right? And there was an address that was 1726. I believe that's the actual address of the house that we're going to be. This is the spot that our homeowner took the picture from. And we'll get to how I came to that here in a second. But as we kind of navigate through this, we're going to notice some things. And remember when we said, when we look at images, looking at layers, look at what's right in front of you, kind of in the middle, and kind of what's in the background, and pull all that information in. Because a lot of you probably saw the bird feeder in the original image. When we went down this street, we also saw what looked to be that exact same bird feeder hanging out of a tree that we saw in the image. It's identical. Now, these are mass produced. This could be, everyone could have this same bird feeder, right? But in the picture, which is in the top left, near the sidewalk, you will see the 3 carved out holes there for what most likely is a water sprinkler system or water metering system, right? And those 3 dots are cut out, so they're for shut off valves and probably master valves and being able to turn them off. Well, on Google, which is right below that, when we were making our way down the street, we stopped and we paused and we looked. We zoom in to the section we thought this is our house. We see the same pattern 3 cutouts. But we also notice that the sidewalk lines kind of also align with what we're seeing on the Google view versus what we're seeing in the image view. So we're looking at more than just numbers on a side door. We're looking at more than a license plate. We're looking at more than a company name. We also want to keep in mind, look at all these little details in the image that could come back, whether it's a tree type, right? And other things, whether it's the rocks in the ground and how they're laid out. Are they still laid out that way? Potentially, right? We're going to look at all these things. We're going to take it a little step further here to more qualifiers. In the Google image, we can start counting some stairs, right? And we can say, okay, the neighbors across the street, when we zoomed in, had this many stairs. On Google Maps, the neighbor across the street where we think our address is has this many stairs. We can see the security signs, right, are the same in the yard. One's kind of hidden behind a tree, but we can kind of get an idea that that's the exact same security sign. But we're also going to take a look at the brick pattern at the top as well. The top of the top step. We look at that column right there, the bricks, right? We can see that there's a pattern because it looks like it's not a full brick. A couple of bricks were kind of broke down to fill in some gaps and put in, which if anyone's ever done bricks and you just hammer a brick and you break it, it's going to break very unique and it's going to have a shape to it, and you're just going to put it in there to do that. Well, when you do that, I can use that information now and validate that with the Google image versus what was in the image that we found. Those patterns match up as well. So the shapes of those bricks also align with what I'm looking at. Now, color variations may differ because of sunlight and things of that nature. So keep in mind that color variations might be a little different. The bushes align as well on the Google Street View versus the image that we have. Those bushes and how it's shaped all kind of line up as well at the same time. So those are also things that we're looking at. Now, house colors may change as time as well. Google may have an outdated image on there versus the image that we have. So house colors could change. But what's not going to change is your brick pattern. That's never going to change unless you rebrick your house. Why would you do that? Right? So keeping these things in mind, all these little things are going to help you validate your information as you're going along. People could say, "Well, that's not right. That's not right." How can you say that's not right when I have this type of information? You're going so much deeper than most people typically would. Also, we look at the address, and I went to public records. I went to a permit page for the Cornelius location in North Carolina. We popped in the address, and on the day that this image was posted, someone filled out a permit to put that hot water heater into that house. The 40-gallon hot water heater was put in. Now, the business that it's associated on there is different. It says Champion Residential Services. So then we're going to go look at things like open corporate records, open corporate websites, things like that to say, hey, does this company have a DBA or a doing business as name, right? So the legal name is Champion Residential Services, but what's their DBA name? It's Morris Jenkins, right? And the address that's on that Morris Jenkins physical address and things of that nature all align with the website's address and the website information. The phone number is different because that's gonna they're utilizing the legal name address for that. But a lot of the information all lines up in that aspect. So that's kind of the talk. This page here we'll share with you guys as well. There's a lot of resources. I didn't use all these particular resources, but some of the things that you guys talked about earlier, which were like Google hacking, Google dorking, things of that nature. These resources in there. DuckDuckGo has their own kind of like Google dorks as well called Bangs. Bing also has some as well. Other sources like reverse image searchings, Google's, Bing's, Yandex, 10i, PemEyes. These are all out there. Radar reverse image. It used to be good. I'm not sure if it's still around. I may need to update this on there. Username searching, people searches. I put VPNs in here for the OPSEC reason. Is it's good to have this information in there when you're doing researching and things. You may want to throw a VPN in there, whether it's Proton, whether that's NordVPN, or build your own VPN utilizing the Streisand effect and build a Streisand VPN and do it yourself. If you want to host it yourself, you can do that with Streisand effect. If you want to utilize something like a Proton VPN, which I highly recommend, or a new NordVPN, those are good companies to utilize. If you're going to look at VPNs that aren't storing logs or capturing logs. It's storing logs and capturing logs are different than just working with law enforcement, because Proton works with law enforcement, but they don't have all the information to give up like most VPNs do. So keep that in mind. And then collection of tools, you can look for those things, email reverse stuff, you can do that. I've got some stuff on here on can I come back and do more OSINT adventure talks? I'd love to. Love to do some more talks. I've got a couple of more talks that I could definitely give you guys on having a bot attack your website and then finding out who that person is behind the bot, potentially the group that's attacking the website, and then sharing information with law enforcement and doing that whole story as well. So definitely can do that. These tools, we'll get these list of tools out there as well. And then this is where I pause for questions. But that essentially is the talk on that. And you kind of see the whole, and to answer the question or the goal at the end of the day is our executive posting things that could be a threat to themselves or the organization? Yes, they most definitely always are. Because now with that picture, I was able to identify their actual home location and turn around and like, now I can target their house, right? I can do different things because on that permit, and now that I have a house, I can go look at tax assessor records, validate that it is my executive, right? Who's paying the taxes on that house, right? Whether it's a trust or an LLC or it's a person's name, I can do that. And now I can start looking up names and say, well, do those names show up on Facebook, on X, on Twitter, on all the websites, right? All the social media sites, right? And then see what their exposure is even more, right? We can definitely go down that rabbit hole as well. But I want to just thank everyone for their time.